Thank you, Mike. I know that this respectful and celebratory applause for you could go on for the whole hour, so I apologize for interrupting it. But for many of you here, Maria Ressa needs no introduction. She has become an icon of press freedom, an icon of standing up to a repressive government that has used that dreaded word, F news, and lies and misinformation to try to debilitate her, to try to destroy her website, and to try to keep out of the news and out of Filipino citizens' heads the truth that she and her colleagues at Rappler.com have unearthed and continue to unearth for the last 7 years since Maria helped create the website. On a personal note, I can say that Maria and I first met 22 years ago, which is kind of shocking, when she was still at CNN as Southeast Asia correspondent, and I was the Boston Globe's Asia correspondent. And she was an incredible, crusading, truth-promoting journalist, even then at one of the largest international news organizations, and she's been able to, through her own ingenuity and entrepreneurship and dedication, create a very important news outlet for the Philippines and really taught us all a lot of lessons. So I'm going to start by asking Maria to introduce a video she's going to show us, and then we'll go on from there.
First, thank you for coming, and thank you for the invitation for me to come. It's overwhelming. And I apologize, I have just come straight from the airport.
Literally, she just arrived from the airport.
At 5 o'clock to here. I'm so glad to be here. You have no idea how glad I am. The video that you'll see is a 3-minute video. It captures the dropping when journalists came together in Times Square to ring in 2019. I think that really is the theme, and that is part of the reason we moved heaven and earth to really, I wanted to be here because of that, because I think we need a clarion call for journalists to come together. Something is going on in our world, and this 3-minute video, I hope, will show you what's happened in the Philippines. From the time the ball dropped, we'll go back in time in 2018. You just have to click the first slide. Oh, is this me? No. Yes! Why don't I just do that? Okay. Shall we?
If I can make it there, I'll make it. Anywhere, it's up to you. New York, New York.
The Securities and Exchange Commission has ordered the closure.
The Securities and Exchange Commission orders the revocation of
ang Certificate of Incorporation ng online news site na Rappler.
We felt that going to get PDRs, which don't give any ownership or any control, would give us the ultimate independence.
Rappler, try to pierce the identity, and you will end up American ownership.
Ay funded, gano'n na mga NED, Rappler, yung mga gano'n.
In 2016, Rodrigo Duterte was elected, promising to wipe out drug-related crime. It will be bloody, he warned. The funeral parlors will be packed. He has kept his promise. Thousands have been killed, many among them the poorest in society.
Doctor, your articles are rife with innuendos and pregnant with falsity. We do not intervene in the affairs of the armed forces. Since you are a fake news outlet, then I am not surprised that your articles are also fake.
Maria and her team are a shining example of principled resistance to the erosion of democratic norms. They have also shown how a newsroom led and staffed by women can stand up to a misogynist president.
You know, this is the time to fight. This is the time to tell people, here's the line. And you have to make sure that our government doesn't cross it, because when it does, we're no longer a democracy. We at Rappler decided that when we look back at this moment a decade from now, we will have done everything we could. We did not duck. We did not hide. We are Rappler, and we will hold the line.
All right, well, that was wonderful, inspiring, and it's literally hot off the video presses, if that's a phrase I can use. This video was just sent to Maria by her team while she was in transit from the Philippines to come here. So this is fresh content. It has not been viewed before it was made for IGAF. Some of the images from in there, for those of you who might not recognize them, Maria was one of 4 journalists honored on the cover of Time magazine's People of the Year award at the end of last year, which went to basically journalistic crusaders. She, the late Jamal Khashoggi, and others were honored, and so one of the covers was Maria on the cover for that incredibly prestigious recognition. And she also, there's also footage in there from her getting a Press Freedom Award in, I think it was November or December, from the Committee to Protect Journalists, which was a great event in New York, and another great award she got, I think, in October, a Press Freedom Award from the International Center for Journalists, and I know Joyce Barnathan, the executive director, is here, and that was also a wonderful event. I realized I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Indira Lakshmanan. I'm the executive editor at the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting. So Maria, before we start into your presentation, I'd love it if you could give us an update past this video, because you have just been arrested a couple of days ago. You posted bail, I think, for the 8th time, and there have been charges against you, what, like 11 times? Tell us where we are now.
Friday, I got off a plane. I was arrested as I got off the plane. I posted bail. Monday, another arrest warrant was issued, and I posted bail again. I spent most of that day with our lawyers because we now have 11 cases and investigations against Rappler. On Wednesday, that's the day that I finally got approval, full approval to travel. I can't travel without approval from 6 different courts. I had my first arraignment. I didn't know how to react because that's the first. I've never been charged as a criminal. I've been treated as a criminal twice. I've been arrested twice in a little over a month. Each time allowed to post bail. So we're in a stage now where the first of 11 arraignments has happened, and very strange. We're ready to fight. Each one of the cases are, for me, ludicrous. 9 of the 11 cases stem out of that one event. And the end goal is to keep us busy. It's a war of attrition, to keep us paying money. We've now paid more in fees than Imelda Marcos, who's been actually convicted of crimes. So my last thing, I think, is the shock of, you know, coming off the plane and then getting pushed into a van. And in the van, there are 4 members of the SWAT team, fully clothed with guns, and then 3 other officers, 7 police officers, to take a journalist to custody.
So isn't it true that if you were ultimately found guilty in what seems to be a trumped-up tax case, and also based, by the way, on false news, in other words, not news, but misinformation that was spread about you in social media and beyond, and it's now being used and quoted in legal cases, even though it's provably false, what could happen to you if you ultimately get found guilty? And aren't you worried about getting on that plane from Rome and going back? Will they let you in?
I think they'll let me in. I mean, when I was in San Francisco, my parents, who I've asked to go back to the United States, they said, don't go back. But I have to go back. I have a fantastic team that is doing great investigative journalism. And I think, if anything, you have to chronicle the dissent. So just the threat of intimidation isn't enough. There have to be actions, because we will look back in time, and there hopefully will be people that will be held accountable for every one of these points. In the 4 tax evasion charges I faced Wednesday, each one carries a maximum jail time of 10 years. If I lose, that's 40 years in prison, but that's only the 4 tax evasion charges. There's a 5th. Then there are the criminal anti-dummy law. The anti-dummy law carries a maximum penalty of 15 years in prison. I'm optimistic that there are men and women inside the Philippine judiciary who will stand up to power and hopefully throw this out. My first day in court, there were 3 judges in the Court of Tax Appeals, and so I'm hoping that is actually going to work in our favor. It was done very professionally. I mean, you can only make so many calls when you are in power. And at some point, I'm hoping that the integrity of the men and women inside the judiciary will also kick in. Look, I think this is a dangerous time to be a journalist in many parts of the world. And I think while we have the norms that we have now, we need to fight tooth and nail that it doesn't get rolled back any further, and that every push to push us towards a dictatorship or authoritarian rule gets challenged. So much has happened without any challenge, and I think that's been enabled by social media, by technology. We real people, we need to stand up and fight back.
Well, that's a really good segue about what's been enabled by social media, because I know you want to talk to us more about that, about the kind of duality of social media. On the one hand, Facebook, your stories being promoted on Facebook allowed you to grow into a very large and very influential and very successful media outlet, online only. At the same time, that platform and others were used to weaponize hate against you and misinformation and lies that are now being quoted by Duterte's government against you in legal suits. So can you talk to us about that?
I see Jeff in the audience also. So let me quickly, I hope I'll go through this in about 15 minutes, and then we can do a Q&A. Let me pull up. This is what we're all facing today, isn't it? I mean, the first here on the left was a statement I gave to Al Jazeera: if you make people believe lies are the facts, then you can control them. And Tim Snyder on tyranny, he wrote on tyranny, he actually broke it down into those 4 steps. If you want to rip the heart out of a democracy, you go after facts. That's what modern authoritarians do. Step 1, you lie all the time. Step 2, you say it's your opponents and the journalists who lie. Step 3, everyone looks around and says, what is truth? There is no truth. If you have no facts, you can't have truth, you have no trust, right? That's what we've seen pulled back. And then finally, resistance is impossible and the game is over. I woke up somewhere in our journey, and let me give you the Philippines journey. Many of you have seen some of this over the years, because I've been talking about this for 3 years now, right? Aren't you bored with me? But here we go. I'll just quickly show you the global phenomenon, patriotic trolling. This was coined by Camille Francois, State-sponsored online hate and harassment campaigns to silence and intimidate. As early as November 2017, Freedom House wrote a report that said in 27 countries around the world, social media, cheap armies were rolling back democracy. And what did we do? Flood the market with false news, with disinformation. Women were targeted more times. Demos in 2014 said 3 times in the Western world, women were targeted 3 times more. What we're seeing in our data is women in the Philippines are targeted 10 times more, and we're still going through it. The 3 steps that we've lived through: you attack the information operations, attack the credibility of whoever is targeted. They allege corruption. Doesn't mean if it doesn't have to be true. In fact, it isn't true. And then you repeat it. If you repeat a lie 1,000,000 times, it is the truth. Then you use sexual violence. That's step 2. You inflame the biases. You fuel misogyny, degrade as a sexual object. The minute that happens, you have no credibility. It's hard to fight. I've been called every animal you can think of. I've been, well, let's keep going. Finally, the 3rd part. Hashtag arrest Laila de Lima trended 3 weeks before she was arrested. Social media is the astroturf, it's the fertilizer, and then government action comes on top and amplifies it. The people trying to fight for truth are sandwiched somewhere in the middle and pressured, just like crushed. This is what happened to me with hashtag arrest Maria Ressa. The machine tried to actually get it to trend in May 2017. May 2017. Didn't trend. It only maybe like 100, 150 mentions. And I think that's the reason I'm still here in front of you. But you'll see. So this is like looking back in time, right? We did this story with The Intercept where we took the transcript of the conversation between Trump and Duterte. We did that story. And then all of a sudden, this is one of the content creators, the pro-Duterte blogger, says Rappler just made the Philippines a legitimate target of North Korean nuclear missiles. It's crazy, right? People believe it. From there, the hashtag jumps to a campaign account of the Duterte campaign. Ipatawag na yan sa Senado. Call her to the Senate. Hashtag arrest Maria Ressa. Then from there, it jumps to a real person. And this one is a pro-Duterte supporter. I can smell an arrest and possible closure of Rappler.com. May 2017. Then we go to the sexual violence. Maybe Maria Ressa's dream is to become the ultimate porn star in a gangbang scene. It's not, but here's your last. This was in Rappler's account. Me to the RP government, make sure Maria Ressa gets publicly raped to death when martial law expands to Luzon. We've been under martial law now. There have been 2 pushes, right? These 2 are young boys. Well, boys, they just graduated college, and as soon as I posted that, their schools contacted me. This information warfare, the propaganda, has an impact on real people and on the values of our societies, and it scares me, the medium-term impact. Historical revisionism. We're seeing it in the Philippines. Marcos campaign accounts. So the campaign accounts here, it's a gradual shift. It's kind of like what Indira said. The government calls me a criminal. They repeat the word criminal 1,000,000 times, and people think I'm a criminal. Marcos, convicted, right? Convicted of plunder, of taking billions of dollars from the Philippines. And yet, here's what we're seeing on social media. And it's not just the post alone. It's the comments. It's the astroturfing of comments that is making martial law, it was okay. It wasn't so bad. And it's really the media's problem and the academe. So we're seeing this happen right in front of our eyes. And then finally, this is like the kinds of stuff that I have to deal with, the lies. I can't answer all of them, but apparently now these are real people. This is a former journalist, both of them, former journalist, the former spokesman of the Philippine government, saying that my parents are Indonesian. They're not, but I was based in Jakarta for a decade. But when it's repeated 1,000,000 times, how do you respond to it, right? I'm going to show you how journalists are targeted in the Philippines. I am confident this is what's happening in the United States and in other parts of the world. This is January 2018. 2 survey results released that same month They both say complete opposite things. The first is the Pew Global Attitude Survey. They asked Filipinos, real people, what do you think of traditional media? 86% said they thought traditional media was fair and accurate. The bottom is a survey by it's the Philippine Trust Index. They work closely with the Edelman Trust Survey. There they ask people on social media, what do you think of traditional media? And it's almost the complete opposite. 83% on social media said they distrusted traditional media. So how does that turn around, right? How did both of these things happen? I forgot to give you one stat. 97% of Filipinos on the internet are on social media, are on Facebook. 97%. Facebook is our internet. Here's the reason why you had that. It's a timeline of the attacks against Rappler and against journalists. And I want you to just look at two. Bayaran, which is the fourth down from the top. And you can see the timeline goes from January 2015 to April 2017. Our campaigns began right around when you see the red lines becoming a straight line. July 2016 in the middle, that's actually when the drug war began. This is strongly correlated. Bayaran means corrupt. Biased is the one at the bottom. So you can see, like in your societies, there are fracture lines. Most leaders will try to heal those fracture lines. What we're seeing now is a pounding open of the fracture lines. So society gets fragmented, and the lie becomes the truth. So starting in December 2015 to January 2016, the mention of corrupt media begins to amplify, and then it becomes a solid line by the time the drug war begins in July 2016. The attacks, what happens then? Free speech is used to stifle free speech. This propaganda machine on social media began to attack anyone who questioned the killings in the drug war. And they are as vicious or more vicious than the attacks you've seen. What we did, we began to collect data. And that data we put in a database that we created a crude UX for our social media team so they can figure out what's real and what's not. Here's the database. This on the left side, those are fake news. I'm going to use that word. Those are the URLs of accounts that are spreading lies. The middle, those are Facebook accounts that are spreading those URLs. And anytime the average reposting, go all the way to your right, anytime it's more than 10, it turns red. I want to bring you to October 2016, which is when we came out with a 3-part series on the propaganda war, the government's information operation. This is what it looked like in October 2016. You can see it ramped up, right? And then I want you to look at one Facebook page, Sally Matay. This account was deleted in April 2017. And then you can see, this is just what that page posts. So my social media team can then see, oh gosh, it's just a cut and paste account. And you can see where it posts. It posts as much as 82 to 84 times a day, and which groups it posts in. The campaign pages of the Duterte campaign and the Marcos, Bongbong Marcos, the son of Ferdinand Marcos, ran for vice president. Those become the areas where these lies become viral. So they're now quite mature because they were created for the campaigns in 2016, and they've only gained more, right? I want to show you one attack against our vice president, Leni Robredo. This attack happened in January 2017. It looks like nothing when you just see the data. This is hashtag LeniLeaks. They were trying to take her down. And I want to show you what happens when you map it in a network map so you can see exactly who is behind the attacks. It looks like this. And it starts, it's so systematic that it is broken down by demographic. This account, it takes care of a thinking class. I always say it's a pseudo-intellectual account. This account, Thinking Pinoy, it takes care of the middle class content. And then finally, the mass-based anchor account is that one on top, Mocha Uson. From there, you can see they created the content by this content, then amplified by the middle class account, and then taken on by the mass base. From this is the foundation of our information ecosystem in the Philippines. From there, it jumps to traditional media. And why? Because Sass is a columnist for this newspaper whose chairman emeritus heads international public relations for President Duterte. From that newspaper, it then connects to state media. Around that time period, our state media said that they were working with China and Russia. And we have the Philippine News Agency in pictures with Sputnik. They had visited and were trained by Sputnik. Then finally, let's close that loop. In April of 2017, the mass-based account, she's a former singer-dancer, she was made head of social media for the presidential palace, the head of social media for the entire Philippine government. She since resigned in December, pushed out partly by public opinion, but that doesn't really matter because she resigned to run for Congress, and she'll most likely win. What's our information ecosystem look like today? This is a scrape, and this is all the data from the time from February 12 to 19. I was arrested on February 13th. That was my first arrest, and this pulls that together. Part of the reason information warfare happens is every time we wind up in the news, people who have been silenced either by fear or because they don't want to deal with the toxic landscape, they come up and speak on social media. So take a look at what happened the day I was arrested. You can see the top part. The anti-Duterte clusters are sharing content from traditional news, including foreign news organizations there, but you can see up on top. And then in the bottom, you can see pro-Duterte, pro-Marcos clusters. They avoid sharing content from traditional news. In fact, they make it a point to actually create new news sites. You do see Manila Times there. You can see the Philippine News Agency, but they're in search of an Alex Jones. And they're looking to create an Alex Jones. No one has been that successful. InfoWars, there's nothing like that in the Philippines yet. Mocha Uson blog is the closest. But that kind of thing, right? So that's our ecosystem. In normal times, what's the size of these things look like? Well, the pro-Duterte information clusters dwarf the people trying to get to the facts. And that doesn't mean everyone pro-Duterte is against the facts, right? It's just that there's an awful lot of lies that are thrown at them that they believe. So these pro-Duterte Marcos communities share and spread each other's content within a large coordinated network. They dwarf the news groups because the news groups are not sharing or working together. In fact, what's happening is that the news agenda is far more fragmented today than it was before. Investigative reports in the past would be picked up, would be created by one news group, and then others would pick up the same story. That doesn't happen as frequently now. In fact, it rarely does. I'm just going to end with something very quick, which is exactly information warfare and why this is very important to the Philippines. Let's go back to what Yuri Andropov says. He's the KGB chairman from 1967 to 1982. Desinformatia. I like this because it pulls our world together. It works like cocaine. If you sniff once or twice, it may not change your life. If you use it every day, it will make you an addict. And that's exactly what's happening to our democracies. With so much toxic sludge, with so much disinformation, so many lies, our societies are being reshaped. We're new people. I look to Ukraine to look at how they put their data together. Ukraine was the first one to really fight this, mapping and quantifying political information warfare. And here's the connection to the broader geopolitical landscape. Early last year, we found bots that had come from Brexit, the United States elections, Catalonia. This particular bot had just finished tweeting about the Catalonia elections. When we found it, it was tweeting exclusively about the Philippines. When we did this story, Twitter took it down within 12 hours, within a day, I think. And then on Facebook, this is something that came out of the the Senate Intelligence Committee when they released all the data. Graphica, Oxford University also got that data. This is the information ecosystem that we have in the Philippines, and I'm gonna run over here. I just wanna show you here, right? This is a landscape of the attacks on Rappler. That's Rappler in the middle over here, surrounded by the smaller circles, right? This is the attacks. That's the accounts that were attacking us. The biggest one here was a Facebook page that was just a little over a year old. It's dailysentry.net. Dailysentry.net, we investigated bottom up and found that the experts it used were experts used by RT and Sputnik and Iranian television, and was mentioned up there in this map done by New Knowledge. This story is out on Rappler. We published it in January. I'll end with this. There have been 3 takedowns in the Philippines, and each takedown has included pro-Duterte and pro-Marcos accounts. But it's like peeling layers of an onion. On Facebook, we've taken down the weakest accounts, right? Facebook has taken them down. And yet, when government is behind it, which I will say as a good journalist, the government has repeatedly denied they have anything to do with the propaganda war that we're going through. But it's very clear from the data, that's what you're seeing. I'll end with a 1-minute video, and I'll toss it back to Indira. This 1-minute video will show you that it isn't just me, it isn't just Rappler. I think the reason I keep getting attention, special attention from the government, is because we need to talk about what's going on, and I refuse to be silenced. This is a 1-minute video of other journalists in the Philippines, from foreign correspondents to photographers to, RP Aranada, who's been banned from the palace. I've been banned from the palace, and I'm not even reporting from there. You'll see this. I'll leave you with this.
Have you ever been harassed because of your work?
Yes.
Have you been threatened online?
Ay, oo.
Have you been called biased?
Yes.
Have you been called stupid?
Yes, plenty times. By idiots.
Have you been called disrespectful?
Yes.
Have you been accused of corruption?
Yes.
Have you been called ugly as a response to any story?
Yes.
Have you been called fake news?
Oh yeah, they always say I'm fake news. Anything that's critical is fake, right?
Have you been accused of being an imperialist spy?
Yes.
Have you been accused of being a communist operative?
Yes.
Have you been accused of working for the CIA?
Yes.
Have you been sexually harassed as a journalist?
Yes.
Has your family been threatened, harassed, or alluded to?
Yes, it has. Specifically my daughter. When she died, there were a lot of people who made fun of that.
Have you been threatened with rape?
Yes.
Yes.
No, not me, but my family.
Have you been threatened with violence?
Yes.
Have you been threatened with death?
Yes.
Have you been told how you're going to be killed?
Yes.
Has the violence been described to you?
Yeah, blow my head off or bury me alive.
What will stop you from reporting?
Nothing.
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 Death?
You have to kill me.
That is an incredibly powerful and inspiring video about journalists who we don't know, but who are doing the same work in the Philippines that you're doing, and I thank you for sharing that. I want to start out by asking you, and we will leave time for questions, so I'll go through these quickly. I know that as early as 2016, this hashtag Unfollow Rappler campaign activated at least 52,000 accounts. So that was only 1% of your followers at the time, but there had been a previous investigation that showed you that 26 fake accounts on Facebook could reach up to 3 million others. So has the net been that you've lost more followers or that you've gained more followers?
You know, it's hard to quantify it because when you come under attack and it's your government attacking you, it scares everyone, including people who support you. It's much more muted support. In fact, our advertisers will say, Maria, we support you, but they're very, very far behind us. The 52,000 accounts for me, when they unfollowed Rappler, that shows you the scope of the information operations at that time and how they could, whether it's real or fake accounts, right? Whether they're manufactured. 52,000 accounts are a lot in that time period. To give you an idea, in the French elections, Facebook took down 30,000 accounts, 30,000 fake accounts, right? If 26 fake accounts can ripple to 3 million others, the impact of those 52,000 accounts working in coordination is huge. It's very hard now to operate like it's business as usual, but both for and against, what's happening is that we're waking up slowly, but we really need to wake up much faster because we have May elections. In these May elections, if we lose an independent Senate, then a new constitution could be passed, and you could see the end of Philippine democracy as we know it.
Well, I don't want to just leave that hanging there. I'm sure some people will have questions about that. But drilling down a little deeper, I remember this Pew Global Attitudes survey from last year that found 86% of Filipinos in the physical world said they trusted traditional legacy media, whereas those who got their media diet, their news diet, through social media had a mirror opposite view, and 83% of them distrusted legacy media. Now, you're not legacy media, you're online, but you operate with legacy media traditional values. I'm also thinking about how essentially it has been this double-edged sword for you on Facebook, because they have, even if posts that were posted there have amplified and lead you to have something like, oh, I'm trying to remember, but you had so many threats in one day that a 3-part series came out. You got 90 hate messages per hour for the next month. And I know you've said that it was threats that you had never experienced as a war correspondent. When we covered wars together, we thought that was really scary. This was even more personal and much more scary. So let me ask you, where do you come down on this? Because Facebook has changed the way that, you know, they've done business with what happens to Rappler. So in the end, plus or minus for you?
Not enough. You know, I mean, and I keep pushing back. We're one of Facebook's fact-checking partners in the Philippines, and the reason that we work with Facebook is it's important, right? But when you are doing fact-checking, that's playing whack-a-mole. And what we find more valuable is once we know that this is a lie, we look at the network that seeds the lies, and we keep track of the networks. Facebook is moving quickly as it can, when the work they need to do has to be powered by human beings. Does that make sense? It's the work of journalists. And so starting in January 2018, a man named Nathaniel Gleischer was hired. He's now head of their cybersecurity, and the takedowns that you are seeing, they're announced by him every single time. There have been Russian, Iranian, Indonesia had its first takedown. The Philippines has had 3 takedowns. I joke, and you know, it's not so much of a joke, but I actually have told an audience of Facebook folks that if I go to jail, it's partly your fault. Getting rid of these lies is critically important. And to actually think that you can keep a lie online, right? It's taking away the gatekeeping powers from journalists and then giving it to tech people who think a lie should stay online. But these lies have power, and they come up again. And part of the reason all of these conspiracy theories and the attacks stay is because the lies are allowed to stay. So my pushback again is gatekeeping needs to go back. People need to be held accountable when they spread lies, and when they spread lies with ill intent.
Right. The change, of course, as you mentioned, has come with them now wanting to impose gatekeeping, fact check, et cetera. But as you say, it may take an army of human journalists or editors to do that. But I know you've said that progress is being made. All right, quickly, and then I want to turn it to the audience. You have talked and written about how President Duterte in the Philippines is essentially trying, with his lies, to change the values of as many people as he can in Philippine society, so they will support his extrajudicial killings in the drug war, that they will support all sorts of policies that they would not have supported before. And that, for me, brings to mind the kind of rhetoric that Donald Trump has used against the press, and that many others. So just a few nuggets from for people who don't live in America and don't hear it every day. He's called us fake news, enemies of the people, garbage, scum, failing, stupid, downright dishonest, really bad people, and a whole host of others too long to name. And the underlying strategy is pretty obvious: to discredit the press as a font of reliable and independent information and present himself as the only legitimate window onto reality. Duterte has done that. Trump is doing that. And the question, of course, is when unflattering stories come out, as it was said, he calls, as someone in your video said, these leaders call it fake news, even if it's completely true, simply because it's negative. So in your mind, mapping this out, what do you see as the parallels between Duterte and Trump and other leaders like Viktor Orban in Hungary and beyond who've tried to take this approach?
I think the first time we saw tactics like this was in Russia, right? I mean, you have to go back to Putin. And then if you think about it, as the first targets of Russia were not us, it's not the international community, the first targets were its citizens. And then at that point, their citizens got used to it. Then Ukraine. I'm hoping that, like a virus, we will find a vaccination for this. But I think part of what we need right now, if you look at solutions, is short, medium, and long term, right? We as people have our weaknesses, and this stuff plays to our weaknesses. It manipulates our weaknesses, our cognitive biases, the us versus them. Terrorists use this type of techniques, right? But what we're seeing is a global dictator's playbook, and social media is crucial to it. And again, I can only tell you what we've felt for the last 2.5 years. You're attacked exponentially online. That astroturfing has real-world impact. It will impact your reputation and your advertising, which makes your business weaker. Then you're going to have to pivot for that. As that's happening, we were then attacked by July of 2017. President Duterte, July 2017, President Duterte in his State of the Nation address, that's where you saw it. He then mirrored the attacks that were happening on social media, and then the entire government machinery came on, and in the span of a year, from January 2018 to January 2019, moving into 11 cases. I mean, it happens very fast, because when your people believe it, or when they don't know what to believe, then you are vulnerable. I'm learning this right now, and part of the reason I speak all the time is we need to build communities that are resilient in this. And as journalists in a global landscape, I think that's what we tried to do in Times Square. We need to come together. It isn't politics. This is information warfare. It's asymmetrical warfare against truth, against facts.
Right. Right. Journalism as public service is, if you want to call it activism, it's really, I think, just activism for the truth. All right. Let's take 3 questions at a time from the audience, and I'll take the notes so we know what they are. Go ahead and raise your hands, and I think there's some microphones that you can go to for your questions. Yes, please, Mira. And introduce yourself, tell everyone who you are, and then ask your question.
Hi, it's Mira Self from the Reuters Institute. Hi, Maria, lovely to see you again. I'm very glad you're safe. You talk about social media and astroturfing and that impact across society, but I'd really like you to talk a little bit about television and state broadcasters, because while online media reaches people in the cities, I think in a lot of the countries you mentioned, television is where governments are using their messages, and how do you interact with that and how do you respond to that?
Okay. Do you want to go ahead and answer that while people are getting their questions ready?
I think it's a combination of both. What you're seeing in the Philippines is that state media amplifies. So it's very coordinated. What comes out first, the lies that come out on social media, misleads real people. At the same time, when they hear it coming from state media, then it works. It's very coordinated. It amplifies the tools of power.
And actually, on this question, on all the things that Maria was saying about the threat to democracies and the sort of autocrats playbook, there are a number of other panels on this subject. So people who are interested will definitely have an opportunity to delve deeper on this subject. Just check your program. I promise there are others on this. Does anyone else have a question? I see one right there in the back, the lady here with the brown hair. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Margaret Coker. I'm the managing editor for disinformation at Coda Story. Hi.
Hi,
Maria. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
My question is about business models. Every journalist, no matter where you work and what country you work in, needs to find a way to pay for your journalism. So now, since you're under attack, do you consider taking money from outside Philippine sources? Are you looking at membership models? How are you trying to counterbalance your advertisers or worried advertisers?
Thank you for the question. I mean, the best part about all of this is that, you know what, when you come under attack, you're forged in fire. We were forced to pivot April last year. And what we did is we rolled out an entirely new business model that is B2B. We took what we did, for example, in mapping social networks and taking unstructured data, and began to actually give these ideas to companies, to our advertisers. This is something everyone needs in the age of social media. So that's the first. The second is, yes, we rolled out a membership model in December last year. It's growing. I call it our democracy model, fight for democracy model, but we call it Rappler Plus, and we did a combination of some exclusive content for it, but I'll say in the membership models, it's actually the mission that, and this is what our panel is about, the mission of journalism, right? A lot of people in the Philippines are watching. They're quiet, they're afraid, but they want to help. So how do they do it? We needed to find a safe place for them to do that, and that's what our membership model is built on. Finally, the last part is, with social media being so noisy, so chaotic, we need to listen, right? Part of democracy is actually not just pushing your voice and yelling, it's actually about listening to all sides so you can make up your mind. That's what we were trying to do in Plus as well. So we're okay. This year, we just did our first quarter, and we're 200% up versus last year.
All right, I've seen a question here.
There's one here in the corner.
Okay,
right.
So let's take both of them at once, and she can answer both. I don't know where the first person is.
It's in the dark.
Oh, hello. Go ahead. And please introduce yourself.
Hi. Sorry, it's like in the corner. I'm Ronaldo. I'm a screen player, so I'm not a journalist and everything. But first of all, thank you for your wonderful job and everything. You and all the other heroes of our times. Because it's true. And then there's, you were saying, if I understood well, you were saying it like that you think that the fake news should be kind of erased, in even like from the net and everything, in order to not have them coming back, right? But don't you think this is kind of a little scary? Like, isn't it also like worthwhile to keep them in order to have like a history for us to learn from, you know, what happened before, not doing it again in the future?
Good question. We'll hold on to that. There was someone here who wanted to ask too.
Courtney Raj from the
Hi,
committee.
Courtney.
Hi, from the Committee to Protect Journalists. Glad you made it, Maria. So, question: Facebook has embedded with campaigns such as Duterte and Modi in India, Trump in the United States. Do you think that should be allowed?
Okay, good question. And one last one. Is there anyone else who has a question? I thought I saw a man's hand behind Margaret Corker back there. Okay, maybe she asked the same question he wanted to. All right, last chance, final call, and the baton goes down. Maria, those are your last two questions. Should fake news be erased, or do we need some sort of an archive that teaches us, that sort of is stored somewhere else so you can see it?
I think we need like an equivalent of the Marshall Plan after World War II. All the data, part of the reason our database works is because we kept the data even after the accounts deleted themselves. They're that organized, right? So if one account wants to target Mira, the minute they finish targeting Mira, they'll delete the account. Our database keeps it so we can study it, right? I think Facebook should, and I'll say it with all the social media platforms, the database is public. The attacks are public. The data should be made public for study so we can figure out how our democracy has been gamed by this. And for them, it's very easy for me to say this because I know how tough it is inside these companies, but for them to understand so we can do better the next iteration. So it's not to erase it, but to prevent the lies from spreading as they do. It's the viral cascade that is extremely dangerous. And then finally, the second, Courtney, first of all, I have to say thank you to CPJ, to ICFJ, to to PFDF for starting a legal defense fund for journalists under stress and helping Rappler. Thank you so much for that. That has been so helpful. I'm going to quote Joel in saying this because part of it is now I don't have to worry about the legal fees, and the legal fees were onerous. There were times when I was spending $40,000 a month on legal fees, and now I don't have to fear that I will go bankrupt because of legal fees. So that is huge. The question that you had of should Facebook be in embedded campaigns?
Or other social media platforms
or
too,
other.
I imagine.
So I think this is part of where I don't think they realize the complexity of the world, right? Definitely in 2016, they did teach the Duterte campaign. They tried to teach other politicians because it was about adoption. Today, I think they know the dangers and they're trying to pull it back, but it's almost like, and this is, you know, seeing the companies adapt to it. They're in the midst of this creative destruction, and what we are feeling are the ripples of what they can or cannot do at ground zero. So no, I know that there are good men and women inside Facebook who are fighting against disinformation, who are taking information warfare very seriously, information operations very seriously. The takedowns globally have shown that. But we journalists haven't really talked about the takedowns as much. We haven't written as much, right? Why haven't we? Because those are some of the lessons that we can learn. The Russian accounts, the Iranian accounts, the French accounts that were taken down. In Indonesia, that first takedown, it's the Saracen network that leads closer to the Muslim cyber army. These are different things, and ironically, in every country where it happens, they're connected to the fissure lines, the political fissure lines, and the ethnic, religious conflicts that are in these countries. Like in the United States, where they pounded Black Lives Matter, for example, right? Racial identity, where they pounded lines of identity. That's what's happening in every single one of our countries. And you need local bottom-up knowledge to actually say that. And then we need to take the data to understand it. Some of the data's out there. We're just not doing enough work. I know it's the tail end of this and we're moving on. I guess my last appeal is, first, I have to say thank you so much for keeping our story alive, because that's what's keeping us alive. I am absolutely certain that without the stories being done, it would be so easy to silence us. It's happening in the Philippines, it's happening in your country. So I go back to, why are we here? Journalists have to come together. It's a completely different time. We need to learn new skills, data analytics, social network analysis, even as we're trying to hold power to account in the real world. It's a difficult time, but I think if we share and work together, we can fight back.
Well, please join me in thanking Maria not only for her wisdom, but for holding the line in truth-telling and fact-gathering for the public good in the Philippines and setting an example for the rest of the world. Thank you, Maria.